Hello and welcome to another
Hello.
Ancient Warfare Answers. There's Murray, I'm Jasper, and together we edit Ancient Warfare magazine, and today we answer questions from our listeners. That's why it's called Ancient Warfare Answers. And I think we're getting a little bit silly because we record more than once in one go. And one of the questions we got asked was, if the Roman legion was so superior to the phalanx, how did Hannibal manage to use such inferior methods and defeat the Roman armies for years?
Well, there you go. That's a big one to answer in only a few minutes. There was a little bit more. Obviously, we can only fit 100 characters, so he also sort of asked about that's Disco Shootout, asked about the Gauls and other sort of tribal warfare that Hannibal takes advantage of and is able to defeat the Romans with those. And I think the first thing which you could say is, did Hannibal use a phalanx? We don't know enough really about Carthaginian warfare, although the reality of the warfare of the time is probably that it was similar to a phalanx. And so the idea is, yes, how could he use inferior technology in terms of the phalanx and tribal warfare against this legion, which becomes the conqueror of the Mediterranean? And I think the answer is that Hannibal's use of tactics, strategies, ambushes, and just generally outthinking the Romans is what wins him the battle. If you look at the Battle of Cannae, he takes massive advantage of the fact that in a traditional, both a phalanx war battle and a legion battle, if you're advancing, you're winning. But by having a crescent formation that deliberately falls back, he's able to surround the Romans at Cannae and absolutely decimate them, aided by the fact that his cavalry is able to defeat the Roman cavalry, which we talked about a few weeks ago in another Ancient Warfare Answers. So I think that in that regard, what Hannibal is able to do with the tools to hand is absolutely able to continue to outsmart and defeat the Roman legionary commanders who, until Scipio Africanus and Fabius Maximus, who refuses to fight him, are inferior generals who look to do things in a way that is very much stereotypical and isn't thinking outside the square. And I think when the phalanx fights Rome, they have fought Pyrrhus, not to a standstill, but certainly, we still use the phrase Pyrrhic victory today. Pyrrhus wins the battles of Heraclea, Beneventum, and Asculum, but only just, and he didn't have enough troops to be able to replace them. So even though he's able to defeat the Roman legion of the time in the 280s and 270s BC, the Romans don't learn enough about it to be able to defeat Hannibal's troop types when Hannibal invades. And I think when they do finally face the phalanx at Scypholae in 197 and Magnesia in 190, and then finally Pydna in 168, what you find there is that the generalship of the phalanx when the Roman legion comes against them is exactly the same as the Roman generalship was when it faced Hannibal. They are not thinking outside the square. They are looking to fight a battle frontally. They are either caught at Scypholae when the phalanx isn't drawn up properly, so they're defeated by timing, if you like. And then at Pydna, the phalanx, holds its own until either a very enterprising Roman centurion sees that he can exploit a gap, or it's a command. But, again, one of the reasons for that is that the terrain is unsuitable to the phalanx, that they advance on a flat terrain where they hold their own against the legion, and then when the terrain becomes slightly broken, the phalanx formation necessarily becomes broken up as well, and that the more flexible legion and legionary is able to take advantage of that. And I think what happens then is it basically comes down to generalship, that the phalanx is a tool and a weapon that can remain effective if it's well wielded by the commander and not wielded as a blunt instrument, which I think, unfortunately, by the later Hellenistic period, was what the phalanx had become, mainly because the phalanx had fought phalanxes. and they fight bigger and bigger phalanxes. So by the time they're facing Rome, they're not trying to think strategically or tactically outside of a very narrow range. And I think that the reality of Rome's generals is that they do maintain a thinking of the generals who rise to the top in each generation are the ones who think outside the square and tactically, they have bad periods of generalship, like the generals at the end of the 2nd century BC who are fighting Jugurtha and then the Cimbri and the Teutones. But at the same time, that gives rise to Marius and then Sulla and other generals like Pompey the Great follows sort of soon after, and then of course Julius Caesar as well. So I think the generalship that rises to the top in Roman armies is superior to the generalship of phalanx armies by the time that the Roman legion defeats the phalanx. And what happened, of course, under Hannibal was, until Scipio Africanus, you have a Carthaginian general who's far smarter than any of the generals who come against him, perhaps with the exception of Fabius Maximus, and of course Scipio Africanus, who learns his lessons from Hannibal. So I think that that's where most of those issues come from. I don't think that there's an inferiority in the phalanx per se. And I think one of the reasons I argue that is that the phalanx is still recommended as a formation that Roman emperors can use if they're going to fight the Persians, that the Tactica, which describe phalanx tactics, keep being written right through until the Byzantine period, actually. But you find, we've got one for Asclepiodotus written in the 50s BC. We've got one for Aelian written for Trajan in the 1st century AD. And we've got Arrian's Tactica written in the mid 2nd century AD. So why would you be recommending a phalanx to a Roman legion commander, 200, 300 years after the phalanx has been destroyed as a fighting unit? So I think that, again, as we've said before, it's more nuanced than just a straight out answer. Mind you, I think it's better to say it's more nuanced than we don't know. I think that's a much better,
that's true.
A much better answer.
Well, there you go. There's another ancient warfare answered question.
Bam! It does roll off the tongue. There you go.
See you.